Well, let's take you to our second big story. In this discussion, in this next segment, we'll be talking about unemployment rates. About the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics came up with a report recently releasing the data saying that about 1.7 million job losses had occurred between January and the end of September. We'll be looking at that. But I'll take you to my wall now to review the unemployment statistics released by Nigeria Bureau of Statistics before we get into the decision proper now. Okay, let's get in there. All right. Recent data from the National Bureau of Statistics indicates that prevalent harsh economic situation has thrown 1.7 million Nigerians into the job market January to September 2016. Now, the report shows that the number of unemployed Nigerians rose from about 9.48 million at the beginning of the year to 11.19 million by September ending. Now, the unemployment was highest for persons in the labor force between the ages of 15 to 24 years and the age of 25 to 36 or 34 years, and that's the youth bracket there. And the youth population in the labor force, that's to say. Now, for the 25 to 34 age group, the unemployment rate increased from 12.9% and at the beginning of the year to 15% at the end of September. Now, if we move along, now it noted that unemployment was higher for women than in men. It was about 16% of the women to 12% of the men. And by the quarter of 2016, 15.9% of the women in the labor force were unemployed as of the third quarter of 2016, ending this year. 12% of the males were unemployed in the same quarter we're talking about. Now, the underemployment rate for women went up to 22.9% during the period, while 16.7% of males in the labor force were underemployed during the same review here. We had to do the approximation in here. Now, moving on, we're given that the nature of rural jobs is largely menial and unskilled, such as in agriculture and the likes. Unemployment is more of a concern in urban areas where more skilled labor is required. Now, the unemployment rate in the urban areas was about 18.3% compared to 11.8% of the one in the rural areas. And then let's look at countries with the highest unemployment rates generally. We have Djibouti. Djibouti has about 56% of, and that stands as one of the highest in the world. It has 56% unemployment rate. Congo has 46%. We have Bosnia-Herzegovina has 41%, and Kenya has 40%. Afghanistan has 40%. That's sharing the same stand with Kenya. And in Nigeria, it stands at 13%. Now, those are some of the statistics we have in there. Let's get into our discussion now proper. Joining us right now is the head research, GDL Asset Management, Oluwashina Olubu. Oluwashina, good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to have you join us. And compliments of the season.
Yeah, compliments of the season to you as well.
All right. Now, 1.7 million job losses January to September. How bad for the economy is that in true terms, if we have to paint the picture the way it is?
1.7 million job losses between January and September. I think it just tells a story of the economy from a different dimension. The economy has been getting it for quite a bit now. Of course, you know that there has been consistent drop in the productivity of the economy, which means in other words that we are in recession. So unemployment figure is the recession story told in another dimension. As a matter of fact, if we had had statistics that tell us something different from that, then we should be worried. It's either somebody does not know his job, or is being doctored. And I think I give it to the administration from that angle, because it could be, figures could be doctored. So I will have been surprised, shocked, and I will have been worried if the figures had told us something else, because this just shows us a true picture of things. Because as we speak, unemployment rate in Nigeria is around 13.9%.
All right, let's go to Imo State now via Skype, and we are joining a financial analyst, Nnemeka Obiariri. Really, you remember you've been with us a couple of times, and the issue of definition of recession came up, and some people actually said it's just a terminology, it's just a term. But here are the figures: 1.7 million job losses. That is really astronomical. Your thoughts, please.
Thank you very much. But I want to state as a matter of fact that even that figure of 1 point. Okay, thank you very, very much. For me, I want to say this.
All right, Nnemeka, there is a holdback effect. I'm going to give you some space, maybe to put off your TV set, or maybe turn it down, the volume, so that we can hear you. Otherwise, there's going to be interference in there. So we'll give you a little time to do that while we come back to Oluwashina. Now, the issue of underemployment and unemployment is there, but underemployment, people are still employed, but how bad is that space of underemployment?
I want to say that I believe strongly that because some of these statistics that we see are surveys, and then the MBS cannot possibly go about the country to know or to come up with definite figures. What they do is to get figures based on their sample, and then they extrapolate. So I want to believe that the figure could be an underestimation of what the true picture is. That is one. Then two, let me even take the pictures as the figures as they are.
Yeah.
Unemployment rate is 13.9. Underemployment is 19.7. Now, in my opinion, underemployment is unemployment in another dimension, because unemployment means that people who are able and willing to work get menial jobs that are not commensurate with the skills that they have got. Now, somebody who is a master's degree holder, for example, doing the work that any OND holder could do, is certainly unemployed. Underemployed. Now, underemployment could be that's in terms of underutilization of skills. It could also be in terms of underutilization of the available time. Somebody is employed, but he would love to work for, say, 8 hours, but because of what is available to him, he's able to work for just, say, 3 hours. That is still underemployment. So if you put the figures together, in my opinion, underemployment is a form of unemployment.
So if you put that together, so you even have a higher figure.
Because unemployment means actually that a part of resources that is not put to use.
Okay.
So if you're underemployed on the part of skills, and you're underemployed on the part of time, it means that certain part of your resources have not been put to use. All
right, let's go back to Nnemeka, and I hope we have you safe and sound. Nnemeka, can you hear us? Okay, your thoughts on the issue of the unemployment figure and, of course, the issue of recession. Nnemeka, are you there?
I think we're still trying to get the lines in there.
Okay, all right. So you were talking about the issue of underemployment. Also, another figure that came out is that of the women and the men, where you have more women unemployed and more men more employed. Why is that?
Let me say that more worrisome to me. I do not even want to look at the unemployment figure in terms of the percentage of men to women that are unemployed. I like to look at it from the angle of the youth, because the figure tells us that those who are most unemployed are the youths.
I get that. Why would you want to talk about the women?
The reason I don't want to talk so much about the women is that the truth of the matter is a lot of activities are not captured under either GDP or what's it called, unemployment or inflation figures. Like women get involved in a lot of activities that are not captured, that you could, how do I put it now, that could be monetized, that could be measured. But because it does not fall within the purview of what is being measured.
They are more perhaps more preoccupied with the informal sector.
Informal sectors of some sort.
Okay.
Yeah. So it doesn't although it doesn't mean outrightly that they are not. So, but the one for the youth is the one that is more damning to me, because that's the most active part of the 80 million labor force. Now, the 80 million labor force, we have 80 million people within the labor force. We have about 180 million people, 108 million people active population. So of those population, the most unemployed are the youth. These are people who have got youthful exuberance, waiting, they want to deploy the energy that they have got. So it means that you and I should not.
They are the population who brought in this change. Now let's interrupt your thoughts and bring in the issue of the promises by the Nigerian government. The present administration promised to create 5,000 jobs yearly, isn't it?
Yeah.
And from even the statistics we have, MDC records some marginal growth in terms of job creation. Says job creation rose from 69 million to about 69.7. Yes, I mean 47%. I don't know if do you catch my drift?
Yeah, I do. Now it's not contradictory to say that job grew, yet we still have unemployment increasing. The question is, by what percentage did the job grow relative to the number of people that go into the active population cycle? So if as long as we have more youths being unemployed, it goes to say that you and I should not should not sleep with our two eyes closed, because these are people who would want to use the energy that they have got. If this trend continues, we are likely to have more social menace. We are likely to have more crimes being committed. We are likely to have people going into political thuggery. We are likely to have less sane economy. If you like. So that's what in terms of the social angle of it, that's what it is. And then in terms of the economic implications, when people lose their jobs, because sometimes it's a name that is on the payroll of a company, but there could be 10 unseen names on that payroll in terms of people who are dependent on the person. So when the job is lost, technically a lot of people lose their jobs. So that's one. So we have loss in purchasing power, one. Two, we have people will not be able to save as much as they would. So if anything, they're going to desave. So and the ripple effect is going to have on the economy is that we are going to have reduction in capital formation. And if you don't form capital, you cannot grow.
Okay. All right, we'll come back to this. Let's go on a break and we come back to dwell more on this. And don't forget, at top of the hour, the time for the news update. And Fadishola will be taking us on there. Stay with us on TVC Breakfast. Or if you're just joining us, you're watching TVC Breakfast, and we are discussing the recent data churned out by the National Bureau of Statistics in Nigeria that says that about 1.7 million Nigerians have lost their jobs from between January and September this year. And it's one thing that we're analyzing now. It's one thing that our guest in the studio, Shina, just said when we were going out, that it's going to be challenging, the social effect or social impact of this, because when you have a lot of people like that out of job, anything can happen.
Quite a lot of things can happen, really. But we'll let Shina tell us all that could happen after this timeout for news update with Fadishola.
Fadi, it's all yours now.
Happy holidays, everyone. An attempt by 3 female suicide bombers to blow up the Maiduguri cattle market on Monday morning was foiled by security operatives stationed in that community. The girls stirred suspicion when one of them constantly checked her wristwatch. Our correspondent in Borno State reports that one of the girls was shot by the soldiers stationed at the market, while the vigilant members of the civilian JTF arrested the other two. The Nigerian Police Bomb Disposal Unit arrived at the scene and detonated the explosives the girls were wearing. The Special Task Force, codenamed Operation Safe Haven Plateau, has made this year's Christmas celebration a remarkable one for themselves. The task force singled out some journalists in appreciation of their media house's support in reporting its activities. TVC News Plateau State correspondent Funom Joshua tops the list of the 6 journalists honored at the event. First of its kind, the event, laced with wining and dining, was witnessed by officers and men of the task force as well as family members and friends of the awardees. The chief host, Major General Rogers Nicholas, thanked the news hounds for their display of professionalism in the outgoing year. And in the spirit of the season, wife of the President, Aisha Buhari, extended her hand of kindness to the patients of the Masses Street Children's Hospital and the Lagos Island Hospital. The wife of the President, who was represented by the wife of the Senate President, Toyin Saraki, went from bed to bed, sharing gift items to the children and women. She says the future program was born out of Aisha Buhari's passion to bring succor for children and women in need. The Adamawa State Governor Jubrila Bindo and his cabinet dined with the vulnerable and physically challenged people at a State House banquet for Christmas celebration. And speaking during the lunch, Governor Bindo urged religious leaders to emulate Christ's virtue of openness. He promised that his administration is keen on providing the necessary amenities for the physically challenged in the state. And that's News Update. Back to Mike and Busalami.
Thank you, Fade Shola, for the updates.
Right, we are still looking at the unemployment figure, the 9 months figure gotten by the National Bureau of Statistics, which is about 1.7 job losses due to a recession. And Shino Olubo is here with us in the studio. You were telling us about the effect of this job loss before we went on the break.
Yeah, I mentioned the social effect. I already, in terms of the economic effect, mentioned that there was reduction in purchasing power. Then 2, people instead of saving would save, which is going to affect the economy in terms of capital formation, because it is when you are able to save that you bring capital together and then you can then invest. So it's a leakage of some sort to the economy. Another effect it's going to have economically is that somebody who is not employed cannot be expected to pay taxes. So it's going to affect the revenue that's going to accrue to the government. So another effect that's going to have again is loss of skills. Now, when somebody who has got skills and who has been working for several years he's got several years of experience below his belt. So if he loses his job and he gets unemployed for a period, there's a likelihood for the person to lose some of the skills that he's got. So that again is not good for the economy. The last thing I'd like to say under the economic effect is that there's likely to be reduction in life expectancy, because somebody who is not employed, who has not means of livelihood, is most likely will not have access to or not be able to afford health care. So that's going to affect. And when I say somebody, I mean the person with his household. So because the regular thing we see, except for a few,
suicide really, because when you can't even provide for your family,
so even the psychological effect is damning on its own. So the implications or the consequences are just staring us at the face. So it's really not a good one at all in terms of consequences.
All right, the director of Trade and Exchange of the Central Bank of Nigeria, in talking about this, said that the resilience of the informal sector contributed to cushioning the effect or the impact of the economic situation generally on the country. Now, even though you mentioned the informal sector earlier on that is not captured, but how important is the informal sector in the scheme of things?
Yeah, I mean, if the question is as important as looking at it from the angle of looking for solution. Now, some of the solution to addressing unemployment issue is trying to address the how do I put it now? The weaknesses of the informal sector. Okay. Now, economies that grow, economies that record high growth rate and low unemployment are economies where the SMEs are empowered. In fact, the SMEs are the hunchback on which the economy rides. So, if you must do well, if you must have reduction in unemployment as we desire, then there must be a very strong effort as ensuring that the so-called informal sector is helped, and then the SMEs are. So the idea of the government being the largest employer of labor should be dispensed with, and which means that it begins with total overall. We should overall
but you're aware, sorry to interrupt you, you're aware that most of those job losses you're talking about are from the private sector. Most of those job losses are from most of the people who close shop are the manufacturers, people who no longer have access to forex and things like that. So really,
it's neither here nor there. The figures of those who are, and that's why I said earlier that a lot of people are not captured in this survey. Now, those who are captured in this survey many of them are people who do not have access to forex, like you mentioned. And the figure in terms of the contribution to GDP in Q3, the largest contribution to GDP was trade. And trade is basically those who get dollar, buy things from people who are basically self-employed. Now, but in the third quarter figure for GDP, the highest contributor was agric, making trade to be second with about 16% contribution to. So
that automatically apparently just tells us where the job losses came from.
Yeah. That apart from the fact that, because typically government will not, if not for what is happening right now, we don't get to feel it this much, because government at one point or the other would always employ people but we cannot go on with that structure.
Let's look at some of the initiatives of the government, the Empower. And you remember the capital expenditure for this year was the largest so far, and one of the promises was, okay, it was going to create jobs, it was going to help alleviate the sufferings of the people. What's going on with those policies?
Some of those policies are handouts. When the environment is right, the environment will entice people to do businesses. Let me paint a scenario. You tell a graduate, some of the things I tell graduates when they go for NYSC program is that there are no jobs out there. You have to you have to create your own jobs, be employer of labor. Yeah, those things as good as they sound. Now, as much as good as willing as a graduate would want to have his own economy, the question is the environment right? Where you have to provide your power by yourself, you have to provide your own water, you have to probably do a scheme of some sort that will ensure that the road to where your business is tarred and all. So by the time you put all of these things together, the incentive to actually own your business is not there. So people just go for the easy way out of getting them. So we need to ensure that the environment for business is okay, starting from access to finance. How much do I need to, what rate would I need to pay on every money that I want to borrow from the bank?
CBN will want to boast about the anchors, the borrowers initiative. Perhaps that helped the agriculture to jack up a bit in terms of GDP?
What help agriculture is not just what they give agriculture. I was going to mention that. In fact, that's a very good example as to telling us that we need to domesticate the employment that we give to other nations. What we do most times is to bring unemployment to our own country, okay, and give employment to, so we can domesticate it. Some of the reasons we are having the growth we have in agriculture is because a lot of the things that are imported are no longer imported because of forest restrictions, and they have to come and patronize local agri companies. Okay,
we have Nnemeka back now. Quickly, let's throw a question to Nnemeka.
No, I think okay, let's go on a break first.
Oh, okay, all right.
Well, we go on a break, and when we come back, we'll be having Nnemeka Obiariri with us on Skype from Imo State. Stay with us on TVC Breakfast. you're just joining us, you're watching TVC Breakfast. We're discussing the 1.7 million job losses in Nigeria, statistics released by the National Bureau of Statistics, and we are discussing that right now, and that was from January to September of 2016. We have with us in the studio Oluwashina Olubu joining us, and we've been talking about this. And right now we have Nemeka Obiareri joining us on Skype from Imo State. Nemeka, we can hear you now, I guess. You can hear us now. Now, let's get into, we've been talking about this. You are in the villages now. I'd like to make comparison between Lagos, where you have been, and the village where you are. The statistics show that unemployment rate in the urban areas stands about 18.3%, and in the rural areas about 11.8%. From the two sides, between when you were here and where you are right now, how bad are things from what you have heard or what you have seen? Can you hear me?
I think when we talk about yes, I can hear you. I can hear you clearly.
Okay, go ahead.
I can hear you clearly.
Go ahead.
Okay. The unemployment rate, why is lower in the rural area? For some of those that dwell in the rural area, the cost of living is lower. And again, like we mentioned about the informal sector, which has also helped. Most of the what we call employment in the rural area, people trying to lay their hand to whatever manual jobs and now to take out a living. Now, back to the issue of unemployment. Take of a population of about 73 million Nigerians that are employable. I also have my data about that figure. That figure in the actual sense is actually higher than that. I'm looking at between 3 to 4.3 million if we actually capture the true data of unemployed people in Nigeria. And now, this you mentioned, the ugly effects of this unemployment. And the question we should ask ourselves, in the agri sector, what can we do to ensure that the figure does not look ugly at the end of 2017? Providing solutions. Like the agri sector is a huge sector. It's a sector that can comfortably give us between 45 to 60 billion dollar income in revenue every year. Look at the sub-Saharan Africa alone. The food import in sub-Saharan Africa is over $48 billion. And Nigeria has the capacity to be able to sweat 50% of that amount of money. What do we do to ensure that even the agri sector, which is actually the bedrock of Nigerian economy, is sweated along the whole value chain? It's not just cultivation, processing along the value chain for the consumers. Take for instance cocoa. Cocoa, the biggest exporter of cocoa in the whole world is Côte d'Ivoire. Côte d'Ivoire used to be a distant third after Nigeria pre-1966. And apart from cocoa export, one of the byproducts of cocoa, which is chocolate, has a market of $98.6 billion. Imagine if we look at the other value chains, other agri sectors where we have strength, like the issue of palm oil, the issue of cocoa. Let us look at what we can do. I don't know if any of us have heard about the Weimar Group. Weimar Group is a mega company. Revenue of over $42 billion. Weimar has gone into some strategic PPP partnership with PZ Nigeria and the Cross River State government. And what did they do? Very simple, and which I think every state in Nigeria should emulate. It's a private partnership joint venture arrangement. What did the Cross River State government do? They handed over a 5,000 hectare of palm plantation to Weimar Group. And they signed a long agreement for them to develop it from that level to about 50 to 250,000 hectares. And over time, they've grown it. They've created employment in Cross River State. PZ, a conglomerate in Nigeria, is the off-taker who buys up everything that is produced by the Weimar Group. Now, there is an outgrower scheme which can also be adopted to create a job. For example, Nigeria is a very large economy, with a landmass of 938,000 square kilometers, and a rich savanna base, forest base of almost about half of. If we dedicate 10 to 20% of our land mass in create the kind of partnership that WIMA has created with PZ and the government, and do agro schemes where we encourage people to have this, the technical capacities, the traits that can help them to leverage and latch into the value chain that we have here, I tell you, we can grow this economy. The problem we have is that we refuse to replicate things that have worked in other climes, contextualizing it in a way it can work in Nigeria. See, if we have a plan, if we have a policy, if we have the right people in the right places, I can tell you this, we shouldn't be talking about unemployment. We have a youthful population that is ready to work, that is willing to work, that are hardworking, but do not have the incentives, do not have the support, do not even have the legislative arrangement that can help them get to where they want to be. If we can put the right policy, put the right things, enter into the right partnership, people that can think creatively, I think we can help Nigeria reduce this unemployment and have a surplus.
Okay. All right, Nnemeka, let's look at the projections for next year's budget. Maybe that will help in some quarters, perhaps. The government has said they are retaining the 500 billion naira special intervention fund to help people, and of course, the End Job Creation Program is to provide loans for traders and artisans, conditional cash transfer to the poorest family, and all that. And according to the Nigerian government, the End Power has employed about 200,000 graduates. Is that the way forward?
Okay, let's see. It's not just enough to reel out figures there, to reel out amount of money that they set aside. What is the transmission mechanism to actualizing this? Remember, at the advent of this regime, they are going to create 720,000 jobs every year. If this government has actually lived up to those promises, by now we won't be talking about unemployment figure of 1.7 billion people. It's not just enough to say, okay, we've set aside 500 billion, central bank will set aside 200 billion. What are the institutional transmission mechanism to accomplish this arrangement? What are the policy requirements and the impact? Even measure if what they say they want to do, they've been able to do it. Now I'll give you an example. Let me even go back to the issue of, have you heard about Copado? Copado is an Italian firm. We should look back. What did Copado do? They are one of the biggest tomato producers in the whole world. They have similar outgrower scheme, where whatever that is produced in terms of raw tomato, they buy over to use it to produce tomato puree. If you go back to Kwara State, go and look at what the Kwara State government did with the Shanghai Farm project. I was the head of investment banking in one of the commercial banks in Nigeria that invested in that Shanghai project by Kwara State government. What did they do? They brought the Zimbabwe farmers who brought in their technology on how to raise cows, and they developed agro scheme. We have many cow rearers in Kwara State that hitherto we are using their cow milk for fraudulent. But these Shanghai farmers developed a scheme where every milk that is produced by these farmers are purchased for their use in producing dairy products. See, it's not just saying we have 500 billion naira. What are the institutional transmission mechanisms? Where are the policy frameworks? Sustainable, consistent policy frameworks. What are the modalities put in place to measure impact assessment? This money has been there for the past 18 months, and yet we have unemployment. We need to sit down and ask ourselves these questions. We cannot invent the wheel. There are certain things that are done in other climes. Kenya exports over $2.8 billion worth of agri products. Cote d'Ivoire, over 5 billion cocoa. We are doing these things since 1966. The problem we have in Nigeria is our current structure, our feeding bottle federalism that places much emphasis on crude oil. People are so lazy, even at the governmental level. Those we put as our political leaders are not thinking. I can tell you, if you put the right people, I think Additional was very focused. You could measure what he did while he was there. Today, we cannot measure, we don't have even years for measurement of what they are currently doing in the government. If you cannot have a program or policy that are measurable, that and people cannot testify this is what we have done, then we are wasting our time.
Oh, all right, Nemeka, thank you very much for talking to us on TVC Breakfast. Wish you well. Let's come back to you before we round off, Oluwashina. The chairman of the Abuja Lagos, Abuja Chamber of Commerce, talked about the issue of patronizing made in Nigeria goods. Now, how will that help in reducing the number, or how will that snowball into reducing the number of unemployment?
Thank you. Ideally, with our level of interest rates, we should not be talking of unemployment. Because there's a term in economics called Phillips curve, developed by a man called A.W. Philip. And what that thing says is that there's a stable and inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment, which means that economic growth would lead to inflation, and inflation will lead to more jobs being created, thereby reducing unemployment. But what is the issue?
The classic definition of inflation, where you have too much money chasing.
That is when that's when inflation is a monetary phenomenon.
Not structural.
Not structural.
Okay.
Now, in this case, the economy, the inflation we have is structural.
Yes.
And structural in the sense that we import the inflation. It's not necessarily because people have so much money in their hands. So it has to be structurally dealt with. Now, and I have a very good example. An example is if Presco and Okomo Oil are doing well right now, going by their last report. And why? It's because people don't have access to FX to get inputs that they will use to produce. So they stay with local suppliers, and that's making them do well. So that gives us a sense of what we do to ourselves anytime we'll demand for. So it goes to say that anytime we demand for those products that we import, we fuel their own outputs, their own capacity, and when there's pressure on capacity, you are forced to ramp up capacity in terms of your plants, in terms of more branches, and when you do that, a lot of people will have to be employed to run the plants and to man those branches. When we do that, when you buy Nigerian goods, when you do made in Nigeria, it's going to lead to expansion in outputs, and of course, we employ more people.
All right, Oluwashina Olubu, thank you very much for your analysis every time. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And we thank Nemeka Obiariri for joining us earlier from Imo State on Skype. We'll go on a break, and when we come back, we'll be dwelling on other issues. Stay with us on TVC Breakfast.